Charged with first-degree murder and 5 additional counts in the shooting death of a 31-year-old mother in Chicago's South Loop. Her attorney wants her out while the case is moving forward.
Tia has been following this closely from the start. We heard from the man who has a child with both women, and he was there when this happened.
Yeah, he was there when the shooting happened, and he was there in court today, and he had a lot to say to us after court ended. Carlos Smith, we interviewed him before. He's at the center of a case that has devastated 2 families. Today, a judge heard arguments over whether the woman accused of pulling the trigger should remain behind bars and ultimately made a decision. Smith shares a child with Romeca Blackmon, the 31-year-old mother who was shot and killed, and with Quadajah Holly Johnson, the woman now charged in Blackmon's death. Prosecutors say Johnson shot Blackmon during a confrontation in Chicago's South Loop on September 8th last year. Johnson, who was licensed to carry a firearm, has claimed that she feared for her life. In court today, Johnson's attorney argued for her release, but documents show that motion was denied. The defense outlined evidence they say contradicts the state's version of events, including 911 audio recordings and surveillance video. The defense also challenged the credibility of the state's key witness. We also heard again from Smith, who disputed claims made by prosecutors, including allegations that he fist bumped Johnson after the shooting and physically assaulted the victim seconds before she was killed.
I'm just tired of the lies and everything, of what they said I did. I know for a fact it wasn't true. I didn't headlock her. I didn't beat her with the door. I only try to diffuse the situation. They keep deflecting away from that. And what I did what they saying I did made it sound harsh, and I didn't do that. So we need justice. We need justice to be served too, the truth. And they keep deflecting from it.
It was a Monday morning in Chicago's South Loop, September 8th, 2025. A mother kissed her 6-year-old son goodbye, walked him into school, and told him to have a great day. That was the last thing Romeca Meeks-Blackmon ever did for her child. By 9:06 in the morning, she was on the ground, shot in the face, left to bleed out on Cermak Road near State Street, steps away from where her son had just walked through the school doors. What happened in those few minutes between drop-off and death is the center of one of Chicago's most explosive criminal cases heading into 2026. And the details that have surfaced since that morning are more disturbing than most people realize. Romeca Meeks-Blackmon was 31 years old. She was a nursing student. She was a mother who tucked handwritten notes into her son's lunchbox. On that same morning, she had posted one of those notes to her Instagram stories, a message to her little boy telling him he was the coolest, smartest, and funniest kid she knew. She had no idea it would be her last post. No idea that within minutes, the worst kind of violence would find her at a school gate. Here is what prosecutors say happened. Quadajah Johnson, known to many as Holly Johnson, was in that area with Carlos Smith Sr., the father of Romeca's son. The 2 of them had driven there to swap cars. When Romeca came out of that school after dropping off her boy, she and Johnson crossed paths. What started as words became something far more dangerous. According to prosecutors, Carlos Smith Sr. physically grabbed Romeca, putting her in a chokehold. Johnson then walked back to the vehicle, retrieved a firearm, returned to where Romeca stood, and shot her multiple times. And then, in what became one of the most chilling details in this entire case, Johnson fist-bumped Carlos Smith Sr., while Romeca Meeks-Blackmon lay dying on the street. Romeca was rushed to Stroger Hospital. She did not survive. Johnson was taken into custody that same day, but within hours, she was released. No charges filed. The family was left devastated. The public was outraged. And for 3 agonizing months, Romeca's mother, Tina McMiller, who was now raising her grandson alone, waited for the justice system to move. This case lit up the internet. Petitions circulated. Community leaders gathered. And one question hung over all of it. How does a woman shoot another woman in broad daylight, in front of witnesses, outside a school, and walk free the same day? Before this chapter is over, here is the first disturbing detail you need to know. Johnson did not arrive at that scene without a plan. According to court records, she had a concealed carry license and a FOID card. She was legally armed. The gun that killed Romeca Meeks-Blackmon was carried there legally. That is a fact that prosecutors and the defense will battle over in court, and it changes the entire shape of this case going forward. If you are watching this for the first time and you want to stay up to date on every development as it happens, right now is the moment. Like this video and subscribe to True Crime Files. New cases, new updates every week. Hit that bell so you never miss a thing. 3 months passed. Romeca's family buried her, raised her son, and waited. Then on December 3, 2025, Chicago police arrested Quadajah Johnson at her home in Des Plaines. Prosecutors charged her with first-degree murder. And when she walked into that courtroom, she was 7 weeks pregnant. The detention hearing on December 4th was the first time the public heard the full prosecutorial version of what happened on September 8th. And one detail in particular stopped the room cold. After shooting Romeca Meeks-Blackmon multiple times, Johnson did not run. She did not panic. According to prosecutors, she fist-bumped the baby's father, Carlos Smith Sr., while Romeca lay on the ground, bleeding to death. The judge at the detention hearing heard that and made his position clear. That is not what self-defense looks like. Bond was denied. But the case goes deeper than what happened on that street corner. Much deeper. Here is the second disturbing detail, and this one raises a question that Romeca's family has been asking since the very beginning. Was this planned? Court records reveal that Quadajah Johnson had filed not one but multiple protective orders against Romeca Meeks-Blackmon. The first was filed in December 2024. Another was filed in the summer of 2025. Just weeks before the shooting. The most recent order of protection was granted in July 2025. And here's what makes that detail so significant. It was never served on Romeca. She never knew it existed. Romeca's family has a very specific interpretation of those filings. They believe Johnson used the court system not to protect herself, but to build a legal paper trail that could be used to justify whatever came next. In their view, those protective orders were not a cry for help. They were preparation. Think about what that means. If the family's theory is correct, then the months leading up to September 8th were not random escalation. They were strategic. Someone filing multiple restraining orders against a woman she had reportedly never even met in person. Constructing a documented history of alleged threat and fear, and then showing up armed at the same school where that woman's child was enrolled. Defense attorneys push back on all of it. They argue the orders were legitimate, that Johnson felt genuinely threatened, that the victim had made explicit statements about intending to harm Johnson, including allegedly telling Johnson's grandmother she intended to kill her. The defense paints Romeca as the aggressor, and Johnson as a frightened woman protecting herself and her infant. But the prosecution's picture is very different. Prosecutors argue that Johnson returned to that car deliberately. She did not flee. She did not seek cover. She walked back, retrieved her weapon, walked forward again, and fired. That is not the movement of panic. That is the movement of intent. Carlos Smith Sr., the man both women shared children with, spoke to reporters after the first hearing and insisted that what prosecutors described was not what happened. He has not been charged with any crime in connection with the shooting. The family of Romeca Meeks-Blackmon sat in that courtroom wearing pink. They had waited 3 months for this moment. And when the judge denied bond, Romeca's mother said she felt a weight lift, but she made it clear it would not bring her daughter back. Stay locked in. Subscribe to True Crime Files and turn on notifications. The next 2 chapters cover what happened when Johnson returned to court in January 2026, and what those 5 new charges actually mean for the case going forward. January 2026. Quadajah Johnson was back in a Chicago courtroom. This time, prosecutors had done something significant. They added 5 new charges on top of the original first-degree murder count. 6 total counts now against one woman in the death of Romeca Meeks-Blackmon. The pressure on the defense was mounting, and so was the legal maneuvering. The 5 additional charges had been filed the week before Johnson's January 7th court appearance. Details on the specific nature of each charge were outlined in new court filings, and Johnson's legal team responded immediately. Not with silence, but with an aggressive motion for bond. The defense filed a formal argument that prosecutors had not met the legal burden required to sustain a first-degree murder charge. Their filing laid out a multi-layered case for Johnson's release, hitting several specific points that would become the core of her defense strategy. First, Johnson had no prior criminal history, no prior arrests, no prior convictions, no documented pattern of violent behavior. Under Illinois law, a defendant's background is a factor in detention hearings, and her attorneys leaned on this heavily. Second, Johnson held a valid firearm owner's identification card and a licensed concealed carry permit. Her possession of that gun on September 8th was entirely legal under Illinois law. The defense argued this distinction matters. She was not an illegal gun carrier who arrived at a crime scene. She was a licensed firearm holder. Third, the defense argued Johnson was acting under a reasonable fear of imminent harm, not just to herself, but to her 6-month-old infant, who was present in the vehicle. Illinois law does permit the use of force when a person has a reasonable belief that they or another person faces imminent danger. Her attorneys framed the shooting as a direct application of that statute. Fourth, and this is where things got particularly sharp, the defense attacked the witness evidence. They argued that the prosecution's key eyewitness was wearing noise-canceling headphones at the time of the shooting. Their position was that a witness who could not clearly hear the events as they unfolded cannot provide a reliable account of what was said or how the confrontation began. That is a significant credibility challenge, and it signals exactly how the defense plans to chip away at the prosecution's case at trial. The motion also reiterated the history of alleged threats. Defense attorneys claimed that in the period leading up to September 8th, Romeca had made threatening communications through phone calls, text messages, and through mutual family members. They specifically alleged that Romeca had told Johnson's grandmother that she intended to kill Johnson. The defense used this history to reinforce the argument that Johnson had legitimate, documented reasons to fear Romeca, and that fear informed her actions on that morning. What the defense was ultimately asking for was release from custody, either under home confinement or electronic monitoring. They did not get it. The judge denied the request, and Johnson remained in custody heading into the next phase of proceedings. Prosecutors had a counter-argument for every point the defense raised. On self-defense, you do not fist-bump someone after shooting in self-defense. On the witness, noise-canceling headphones do not make a visual witness blind. On the protective orders, a piece of paper filed in court does not override what the video evidence and multiple witness accounts describe. The case was building. Both sides were sharpening their arguments, and as Johnson sat in custody, the family of Romeca Meeks-Blackmon continued to live with the question no court filing can answer. What was their daughter doing in those final moments, and did she have any idea what was about to happen to her? You are watching True Crime Files. If this case matters to you, make sure you are subscribed and have notifications on. Every new update in this case will be covered here. Like this video, so the algorithm keeps putting this content in front of people who need to see it. As of 2026, Quadajah Johnson remains in custody, held without bond. She is charged with 6 counts related to the death of Romeca Meeks-Blackmon, 1 count of first-degree murder, and 5 additional charges filed by prosecutors in early January. No trial date has been publicly confirmed, but the legal machinery is fully in motion. The self-defense argument Johnson's team is building is one of the most consequential elements of this case, not just for the outcome in court, but for what it means to the broader conversation around concealed carry, protective orders, and who gets to claim fear as a legal shield. Johnson's attorneys have constructed a narrative in which their client is a woman who is being stalked and threatened by the mother of her boyfriend's child, who obtained legal protection through the courts, who arrived at a routine car exchange that morning not expecting a confrontation, and who, when that confrontation turned physical, made a split-second decision to use a legally carried firearm to protect herself and her baby. That is the defense's story, and it is coherent. It is not without legal foundation. Illinois self-defense law does not require a person to retreat before using force. If Johnson's attorneys can convince a jury that she genuinely feared for her life in that moment, that Romeca's approach felt like the culmination of months of threats, there is a legal pathway to acquittal. But the prosecution story is also coherent, and it is devastating. Romeca had just kissed her son goodbye. She was steps from a school full of children. Witnesses say Johnson was not pinned down, not cornered, not trapped. She walked away from the scene of the argument. She went back to the car. She retrieved the weapon. She returned. She fired multiple times, and then she celebrated. The fist bump is the detail that the prosecution will never let a jury forget. It is the image that cuts through every legal argument about fear and reasonableness. Because if you are genuinely terrified, if you have just been forced to fire a gun in sheer desperation to save your own life, you do not celebrate. You do not raise your fist to the man standing next to the woman you just shot. The prosecution will argue that celebration was relief. The relief of someone who had just accomplished what they came there to do. There are layers in this case that go beyond the courtroom. There is a 6-year-old boy who started first grade on September 8, 2025. Walked into school with a lunchbox note from his mother, and came home that afternoon to a world without her. There is Tina McMiller, Romeca's mother, who is now raising that child alone while simultaneously fighting for accountability in her daughter's death. There is Carlos Smith Sr., who has not been charged with anything, who allegedly put Romeca in a chokehold before she was shot, who fist-bumped the woman now charged with her murder, and who continues to maintain that the prosecution's account is false. And there is the question of those protective orders, filed months before the shooting, granted just weeks before, never served. A legal mechanism designed to protect people from violence, allegedly used to construct an immunity framework for one. If that theory is proven, it would represent one of the most coldly calculated uses of the court system in recent Chicago criminal history. This case is far from over. As proceedings move deeper into 2026, every hearing, every filing, and every witness statement will matter. The family of Romeca Meeks-Blackmon is watching. Chicago is watching. And so is True Crime Files. If you want every update in this case the moment it breaks, subscribe to True Crime Files right now, and make sure you like this video. It costs you nothing, and it ensures this story stays in front of the people who need to hear it. Justice for Romeca starts with awareness.